when I was the executive assistant to the CIA's deputy director for operations, I had just finished writing something, and so I'd sort of kicked back like this in my chair. I had a small private office, and I had direct line of sight past the secretary into the hallway. So I'm sitting there like this, I'm looking out into the hallway, and I see Bob Woodward walk down the hall. And I said to the secretary,
just strolling in, right?
Just strolling like he owned the place, just walking down the hall. And I said to the secretary, hey, was that Bob Woodward that just walked past the office? And she said, yeah. And I said, without a security escort, like he owns the place. He's just walking down the hall. And she said, oh, you didn't see the memo? And I said, what memo? And she said, George Tenet. She said, George sent us all a memo saying that Woodward's writing a new book and we all have to cooperate with it. And I said, I'm not cooperating with Bob Woodward. But he walked around like he owned the place.
That's unbelievable. And that goes both ways too. Like for Woodward, a journalist, to be walking in the CIA and not sneaking into rooms and grabbing stuff is also kind of a violation, right?
That's a good point.
So yeah, that's that's ridiculous.
We've all read about the reasons for the convocation of the church and the Pike committees back in 1975. The so-called crown jewels of the CIA had been made public, and Americans learned that the CIA had been out there overthrowing governments, murdering heads of state, and this had gone on for decades. So first, how did Operation Mockingbird become a part of that? And maybe the more important question is there still some version of Operation Mockingbird that is still in place in the way that the CIA deals with journalists?
Okay, so I'm going to answer the second part first because there's some interesting stuff there. First of all, there is I think very much a new version of Operation Mockingbird, and we touched on it a little bit in the Twitter files, but not fully. Mm-hmm. But I'll get to that in a second. But more importantly, the church committee story is apparently not done. Just this week, I found out that there is a tranche of church committee files that was never released.
Oh, you're kidding.
That was classified until it may still be classified, but is about to be declassified. And it's kicking around. It's been kicking around the Intel committee in the Senate. And there's still some logistics that have to be worked out, but that stuff is going to come out. I don't know what's in it. My source didn't know either, but it's absolutely 100% that it's there. So in this whole cavalcade of stuff that's coming out now, that's going to be one of the things, I think.
Good grief. 50-year-old documents.
Yeah, you can only imagine what they held back.
Oh, seriously.
Right. So
seriously.
Yeah. Wow. So that story, the family jewels story, that's Seymour Hersh's story, the great investigative reporter. I talked to Cy about that many times. It's an amazing episode in the history, both of intelligence and of journalism. Few people actually remember this, but although Cy became famous for the My Lai story and other things, the family jewels story was actually, he was hammered in the business for that. He was quasi-exiled by his own colleagues for going too far with the family jewels story. He got the New York Times to let him print it. But after that, he was sort of in the wilderness for a few years. Somebody even wrote a book about this. And the family jewels were about a whole variety of horrifying things, including like a wide-scale domestic surveillance operation, sort of planting people in domestic opposition groups. As you say, the foreign assassination stuff. There was also wiretapping of, I think, a pair of columnists. If I'm not mistaken, it was Paul Scott and Robert Allen were the two people. But yeah. Approaching journalists to cooperate with them with the planning of stories. And then Mockingbird, when they finally got those documents, which I think overlaps with the FBI, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Right.
COINTELPRO.
Right.
A lot of that was this whole idea, which has come back into vogue in the FBI, of disruption as a legal domestic strategy. For a while after the Church Committee, the FBI wasn't allowed to do anything. Well, they had to have some kind of predicate to open a case, and they were supposed to make cases, right, against people who broke the law. Previously, what they could do is just sort of say, well, we don't like Martin Luther King Jr. or Malcolm X, so let's disrupt them. Let's plant stories about them. Let's give negative information to journalists that will lower them in the public's estimation. It's crazy that we were doing that, but we are doing that again. And the new form for doing that, you mentioned Ken Delanian before, and I want to be very careful about how I talk about this because I can't say for sure that he's liaising with anybody in the intelligence world, but he was one of many media figures who ran stories about, for instance, the new director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, having been discovered by, quote, Russia's propaganda machine. And these were stories that were sourced, among other things, to a group called the German Marshall Fund and the Alliance for Securing Democracy, which was the creator of this thing called Hamilton 68, which you and I talked about before, which was basically a phony mechanism for saying people were being propagated or supported by Russian bots. I'm sorry, that's a convoluted thing, but essentially they were getting around the prohibition of propaganda against propaganda by saying it was identifying disinformation, right? So what you do is you say that, well, these are Russian bots and we're just going to describe those publicly. But really what you're saying is Russian bots are helping Tulsi Gabbard or Russian bots are helping Devin Nunes. And, you know, that's a pretty messed up thing for any publicly sponsored entity to be doing, I think.
Oh, you can say that again. It's like Hillary Clinton saying that Tulsi Gabbard was a paid agent. A paid agent. I mean, those are not just fighting words. That's libelous.
Yeah, right. That became the predicate for a suit. Yeah,
that's right. And it has a very specific meaning in the intelligence community. It means you're taking money in exchange for either providing classified information or carrying out some sort of operation on behalf of your handler.
They use the term asset too, which also has a meaning, right? Which is you're controlled, I think.
That's right. That's right. Hey, thanks for watching this report. There is so much more that I'd like to dive into, but unfortunately we can't do that here thanks to heavy censorship efforts from big tech. If you want to explore this topic further, you can deep dive into this and access the entire uncensored library of Unified TV linked below. A membership to Unified gives you unlimited access to hundreds of uncensored podcasts, investigative journalism pieces, documentaries, films, and content that was once available on major streaming services like Netflix, but is now banned from the internet. For just $14.99 a month, which is less than $1 a day, it's actually less than 50 cents a day, you get access to all of it. Your subscription also helps keep the platform running free from censorship and corporate influence. Please consider supporting us and enjoy all of our unfiltered, thought-provoking content in return.